Good afternoon, Andy Moss here, tradingadventures.com with a quick post FOMC look at the market and price action. It is Wednesday, December the 10th, and Jerome Powell was out, the Federal Open Market Committee, the Federal Reserve, as expected, cut rates by 0.25%, and the market went up. Not only that, but during the 2:30 press conference from Jerome Powell, the market still went up. He did not come out overly hawkish. He did not send prices lower. It actually kept rising as the press conference moved on. So here's a quick look at the ETF version of the roadmap. You can see SPY is above the rising 5-day moving average, back over the weekly week-to-date anchored VWAP, and touching this pivot high here from just a few days ago, December the 5th. Q's in a very similar situation here. So strength has resumed, but they have not yet pierced and stayed above this recent pivot high there. That's 688.39 on SPYs and 628.92 on the Q's. DIA, same kind of situation. Only the small caps are up and over those levels from a week ago. Moving it to the futures version, same action here, but a little more pronounced on the 1-hour chart of the stock index futures contracts, with the ES and NQs showing the similar action there. Moving quickly over to the crypto roadmap, we can see this yellow shaded area, which I've been pointing out here for quite a while now, still continues to provide resistance for Bitcoin. Ethereum did get over. I shared that on X the other day and came right into the level that I pointed out. This is the anchored VWAP from a pivot high back earlier in the year. Solana and Litecoin still battling with a similar resistance area there in that yellow shaded. So let's go to the daily charts here for a minute. So here's a look at the SPY daily chart. This is that pivot high from December the 5th, and then you can see right above that is the all-time high back from October the 29th. Getting very close to that now. A couple days kind of testing and probing the rising 8-day moving average. RSI is not extended, and volume rose a little bit over the last few days and is right back into the 20-day average here. Qs, not quite as close to the all-time high from late October, but this, again, this is the pivot area that we saw on the roadmap chart, right in the 628s, and back over this level here, which it has danced around a little bit the last 4 or 5 days. So this looks like a decent bullish consolidation here. Will it be enough to propel it on up into here? You know, we'll have to see. This is continues still. The situation hasn't changed. This has come a long way in a pretty short amount of time. As we know, price can correct in one of two ways, by price or by time. And by that, I mean it could sell off or it can move sideways in a consolidating range. That's what we're seeing so far. Would not be surprised to see a bit of profit taking that takes the Qs back down into this area. We've got the 21-day moving average, the 50-day moving average, the anchored VWAP from this November 21st pivot low, and a pivot from this big candle back in October 10th here, all right around $613. So maybe it doesn't get all the way down there. Maybe it doesn't go down at all, but that would not be surprising for me to see at least a brief trip back to something down in this area before moving on into the recent all-time highs and possibly beyond. The other possibility, of course, is that this consolidation here is enough, and today's candle gets things moving, and today's price action gets us moving back up towards the upper Bollinger Band, which is opening to the upside and into this area here. So we'll have to see. DIA, nice big engulfing candle here after a few days of building a range and testing that 8-day, and like the SPYs, it's very close to the recent all-time highs there. That's the Dow Industrials. And finally, IWM continues to be a leader. It's above the pivot high here. That was 252.77. It topped out today near 256.57, and it didn't even touch the 8-day over this consolidation period. Actually, it hasn't touched the 8-day since it crossed it back on November the 21st. It has been steadily above this whole time. So very strong move there from the small caps. They like the lower interest rate environment, or I should say the idea that rates will be lowering, and I'll qualify that by pointing out over here. If we go to the 10-year Treasury, you can see that this has actually been, it's still in an overall bigger range here. You know, look at it like this, something like that. But it's not making new lows for sure. And actually it's coming up, and it peaked out of this range just a little bit today before coming back in. So rates overall still look, you know, fairly stable. If we were to go out to a weekly chart, this is not my normal template here, but just to give you an idea, you know, the trend is lower from this high back in January, the beginning of the year, but it's trying to, you know, there's been rising here a little bit over the last 3 weeks. Now, just like we watched the Qs consolidate and maybe gather steam for another leg higher, this could be and should be considered a bearish consolidation pattern on the 10-year, because the moving average is falling and prices is below the 50-day, or actually that would be a 50-week moving average on this chart. Like I said, this is not my normal weekly chart template here. So let's go back to the daily and move along over into the next thing we'll look at is TLT. On the other side of that, TLT continues to struggle down here below a now declining 200-day moving average. That would indicate if the price of bonds is going down, then rates should be going up, which is what we just were able to demonstrate on that chart of TNX. So that's kind of what we see on the overall big picture. We didn't check the dollar. You see the dollar tested the 200-day, came back, got above it briefly in this pivot area, came back, and so here the last couple of days it's trying again and is not going to get above today. But we'll see what happens if the dollar comes back down. Maybe that provides a bit of a headwind for stock prices to continue to increase. And so while the indices look overall better, not everything's going straight up. And we'll just take a quick glance here at some of the Mag 7 names. Apple is holding in there pretty good. After this pivot high, it's consolidating well here between the 8 and 21-day moving averages, which with the 8-day basically flat and testing this pivot here around 277.32. Amazon had a pretty good day today, getting back over the 8 and 21-day moving average, but they're still declining. So this one, it did make a new recent high, and this could be a new recent low, but we won't know for sure unless it can get past this level and kind of we've got a pivot action in here. You can see it tested it here from this high back in July, and we've got the VWAP from earnings coming down right in that area too. So 237 to 238-ish could be another important test for Amazon, as it was right in this level. Google has been one of the strongest stocks out there, and really a nice and tight bullish consolidation pattern here on Google. So this is something that could emerge again as a leader and take prices back up. Moving on to Meta. Meta trying to get back over the 200-day and 50-day moving averages earlier in the week and the end of last week, and just couldn't quite do it. Back down here. So Meta's got a lot of work yet to do to kind of get these moving averages going back higher and get above them with the price there. Microsoft is also having some trouble here. Hit this consolidation or this pivot area, tested the moving averages a little bit, and then some rejection today back down into this retracement area with the 200-day rising pretty close by there. So this is a pretty critical level for Microsoft in the coming days, is right here around the 466s, 467s on up to the 200-day there, just about $475. NVIDIA, not really going anywhere fast. It's got the VWAP from this breakout right here. It's got the 8 and 21-day coming together, kind of flat, and this is the earnings VWAP right here, which it's staying above, but this 50-day overhead is kind of causing it some problem. But notice that the Bollinger Bands are getting pretty tight. They were very wide up here before earnings, and this move higher, and now they're getting pretty tight. And when that happens, that is usually something that precedes an expansion. So which direction it goes, we'll have to wait to see. But as the price action tightens, the Bollinger Bands tighten, RSI sticks right around 50. This could go either way. And I'm going to look at Netflix as a not so magnificent 7 member. This is just really getting clobbered here for the last month or more from the rejection here at this anchored VWAP. You know, it gapped below it here, came back up and tried to get above and failed, and it's just been a steady progression lower here for Netflix. And finally, we'll round it out with Tesla. And Tesla with decent action here off the 50-day. It tested it for a couple days and rose today and is kind of riding this 8-day moving average higher, and a decent bit of bullish price action there in Tesla to see if it can get above. This is what it really needs to clear right here. This will be 458.87. If it can get above that later this week, Thursday or Friday, then that should give it room up into this pivot high around 472, and then potentially even into the high 488s or 490s. So there's a very quick high-level view of what we see today after the Federal Reserve, and we'll continue to send the updates as price action evolves, and more to come. Talk to you again soon.